Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way morning briefing. With us today is Alison McConnell once again. How's things, Alison?
Very well, thanks, Sean.
Okay, I've got to do it. Got to do it every time now since Tony's off for a wee while. Before we start, a wee word for our sponsors. Sponsored, as you can see on the screen, by OneFootball. Now, it's totally free, one-stop shop app for all your footballing needs, news, fixtures, opposition analysis, some stats, everything you want in there. It's available on Apple, Android, etc. All of that. And as we always do, we thank them for their sponsorship. You can also see down the bottom, running along the bottom of the ticker there, we're still running a special offer. That'll be there in place for a wee while, but try and take advantage of it as soon as possible. That's 30 days of full access to the website for free. So if you go to www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe, you will be able to take advantage of that. So if you've been on the fence, for instance, about signing up, or you watch these videos every day but haven't quite got around to get onto the website, now I would say is the time, and I'll put the link in the comments for you. Okay, so Alison, we're kind of special episode today, if you want to call it that. We figured we'd dedicate most or all of the episode to previewing Celtic women versus Glasgow City game on Sunday, which is the Scottish Women's Cup final. And it's notable, not just because it's a cup final, but because Fran Alonso's side will have done a historic cup double this season if they win it. Now, sorry, I know you're going to come in there. I was just going to say it's some task, isn't it? Because it's Glasgow City that they're playing.
Yeah, and I think Glasgow City have had a difficult campaign too. The fact that Rangers won the league, and this I think they've won something. They've won the league obviously for the last 14 seasons, but they've also won a trophy, I think, every year for the last 18 or 19 seasons. So if Glasgow City don't win on Sunday, then it would represent the first trophyless season for nearly 2 decades, which is extraordinary. And I think there will be a bit of psychology around the game because of that, because they've been dethroned in the league, and I think much will depend on how they react to that. Celtic beat Glasgow City in the League Cup final at the start of December, and I think it was the first time they had beaten them in 4 attempts, and then they've lost 2 league games since then against them. However, I think you would qualify that by saying Celtic had real issues with their goalkeeper, who got injured in one of the games, and then they had to play with a defender in goal. Second and third choice keepers were also injured. Just a real kind of curiosity at that point in the season, and they played both games against Glasgow City with not a natural goalkeeper, which I think would obviously have a bearing on the result. But I think so much will come down to a question of belief going into the game, going in with a sense of confidence about their own ability and believing that they can match Glasgow City. And it'll be interesting to see just where City are in terms of what's happened over the last few weeks.
Yeah, you mentioned how successful Glasgow City have been. You can't ignore that in terms of getting into a cup final. They're not league champions, as you mentioned. Rangers won it, obviously. But you said there, it's Celtic beat them in a cup final, which is not... I realise it is a one-off game, but in the same sense, it's a one-off game and they won it rather than lost it. And in the league games, yes, you could say, obviously, the Glasgow City finished above them, but ultimately the game that came with a trophy at the end of it, Celtic did win it. Now, Glasgow City, I think everybody knows, even if you don't follow women's football all that closely, everybody knows how successful Glasgow City have been. It's remarkable. 14 league titles, 8 Scottish Cups and 6 SWPL Cups in the last 17 years. It's outstanding success. It's an outstanding level of consistency as well. They're just not used to not winning, if you know what I mean? And this is their last chance to take a trophy from this season. So with that in mind, and the kind of overarching point that I made at the start, that it would be a historic cup double for Celtic in and of itself, never mind beating Glasgow City in both cup finals if they were to do it. How do you kind of sum up? I mean, you're going to the game in Sunday, Alison. What's your thoughts and how do you sum up its importance to Celtic specifically, but to both sides? You've kind of touched on Glasgow City's, but to Celtic as well.
I think it's quite the first thing you would say is that there's a huge sea change this season. I think it's quite seismic what has happened in the league development. Rangers going on and winning the league presents a massive change, and I think it's a really seismic moment for women's football because I think it alters the landscape significantly. and I don't think it'll regress anymore. In actual fact, I think the game will continue to grow and develop with a new league structure in place next season too. But I think from Celtic's perspective, the League Cup was the first piece of silverware they had won as a team. So to double that within one season would always feel, I think, significant. I think it would be notable. Last season they finished with a Champions League place. They finished second. I think there will be disappointment at the way the league form has played out. I think there seemed to be a problem just in the creation of chances at times. This season, maybe an over-reliance too on Charlie Wellings for goals. But I think the coming away from the campaign with 2 domestic cups banked would be incredible. But I think it would also point to the investment of both Celtic and Rangers in terms of the league as a whole. And you do wonder now if maybe that might replicate in the women's game what you've seen in the men's game, where you've seen Celtic and Rangers essentially dominate the field for a large part while everyone else plays catch up. And I think their budgets would probably be reflective of that too. I think they'd probably have slightly bigger budgets than everyone else.
Patrick's comment, that's kind of, take it you agree with that. It looks like Celtic and Rangers have rocked up and completely changed the face of ladies football. I mean, it's not like they've not been involved, it's just the manner in which the kind of seriousness and the investment in which they're taking it, isn't it, Alison?
Yeah, I think there's been a move towards professional contracts, which came into force just before COVID. I think maybe about a year or so before COVID, when there was a real drive to start to professionalise the women's game. Not everyone is on professional contracts, sometimes by choice. I think the Celtics captain, Kelly Clark's an accountant. Like, she didn't want to go full-time. She wanted to continue to combine a career with football. But certainly there's been a move towards greater professionalism within the game, and I think inevitably Celtic and Rangers have more money than every other club to invest in that and I think what you've seen is a reflection of that this season. It's not vast, it's not anyway comparable to what the wage structures and stuff would be obviously in the men's game, but I think definitely in terms of budgets they would be out there. But I think you'll see a real drive towards the increasing professionalism of all clubs in the top flight over the next few years. I think you'll continue to see more investment into the women's side. It is only going to grow. Interest and participation rates are up consistently every year. Coaching numbers of female coaches rise every year. Greater resources are pushed the way of women's football, and I think you will see that reflected in an increase in standard and an increase in professionalism.
That kind of takes us on to what was announced yesterday, which I think most people knew that this was happening, but just in case you didn't, it was well, basically, first of all, wider context of this final in general is it's a showpiece occasion, as it always is, and you can kind of view those as an advert for the game. And in that respect, it's worth noting that the women's game in general took another big step this week by essentially being absorbed into the SPFL, which will now run its elite leagues and the League Cup and different things. It will be expanded. You mentioned it a couple of minutes ago. There'll be an expanded amount of teams in it, so you'll have 12 in the top flight, which is up from 10, and then 8 up from 7 in the second tier as well. I think it's St Johnstone joining the second tier. So it's 20 teams across 2 elite divisions, Alison, and the professionalisation, the move towards it. I mean, you've kind of touched on it there, but in the context of the game, but obviously the wider context, it is only getting bigger, isn't it? It is only going to get more towards that. That's the road that they're on.
Yeah, I think there's an increase in professionalism brings that, and I think there is considerable interest in it. I think if you look at the national team, if you look at Scotland, where people play their football and the kind of leagues they're in, and there's a real core of players who are down south, where the English Women's League is, it's night and day compared to where Scotland are. They're probably a decade ahead already. Caroline Weir has been linked heavily with a move to Real Madrid this summer. I think Spanish football has invested massively across the last decade in their women's teams, reflected in Barcelona and what they have done. And I know Lyon won the Champions League final last weekend, but if you look at the Spanish national side, the very clear ambition over the last decade is to create a world number one to go and challenge Sweden and America and take that mantle. And there's been vast amounts of money put into the resources of strengthening the women's team and tailoring the game very much in every sense to the needs of female athletes and what that means. And I think Scotland still lags significantly behind in a number of ways. And I think obviously that comes down to money, the money that's within the game. I think you see that the men's A team struggle at times to attract sponsorship, struggle to bring money in. So it's obviously more difficult then for the women's team to do it. But when you use a comparison of where they are compared to other European teams, they are significantly behind. So I think there'll be a real ambition to push what's there just now, to build in the foundations that are there just now, but to create a bigger league, a more professional league and a more competitive league.
David making a point, great money to be made in women's football just now. I'd probably argue that, Alison, would you probably as well? That a lot of the places, very few exceptions, but it is on the rise. I think similar to what you touched on there in terms of the men's football as well, it is going to be, with the advent of professionalism, the rise of it, it's still going to prove difficult to actually keep the best Scottish players playing in Scotland, I would think, even for Celtic and Rangers, because the bigger teams that can pay bigger money and all of that will probably still be America and down south. But you should always strive for it. I mean, right now you're probably thinking, I'm thinking maybe Kim Little, the best Scottish player of maybe this generation. Played for Hibs ladies for a while, but beyond that has spent the bulk of her career, certainly her peak, abroad or down in England. I think that might still be something that they struggle with even 10 years down the line when there is more money in the Scottish game, and Celtic and Rangers specifically have moved towards maybe even full professionalism by then. I think it's just a byproduct of playing in Scotland, potentially, whether you're a man or a woman. But I do get what David's saying, that it is going to be a viable option in terms of a full-time career.
Yeah, I think what you have just now for any young girls, any young primary school girls that are aspiring to make a career in football, what you have now is a genuine pathway. There is an opportunity to have a career playing football, which didn't exist. I would say even going back 10 or 15 years, it might not have been quite as clear, and there would have been opportunities in, like as you said, maybe scholarships to America and things like that. But definitely it's a much more viable career path now, and it's much more visible, which I think is important. I think as you say, if you can't see it, you can't do it. So I think the fact is that you are aware now of players like Caroline Weir and Lisa Evans and Kim Little, and you know where they've been playing their football. I think, if Caroline Weir goes to Real Madrid this summer, that's an enormous story. It's absolutely huge. You have a Scottish midfielder out playing in La Liga, and even we spoke to Caroline Weir a few weeks back because she was the Scottish Football Writers Association International Player of the Year, and we spoke to her and she was talking just about the facilities at Man City and about Kevin De Bruyne coming over one day, and the two of them sitting having a coffee and sharing the same sort of training pitches and facilities, and it's just it's a different world. I think it's a different level too of football, and I would agree with you. I think Scottish football will probably always struggle to hold on to the talent that it produces, simply because there are more prestigious leagues and environments to go and play football in. But I don't think that should detract from trying to make the league the best that it can possibly be. And I think that comes with a move towards a more professional structure.
Somewhat you mentioned there, if you can't see it, you won't know, that kind of thing. David Gillespie is going to see it. He's going through on Sunday. Going to support the Celtic women's team. That's good to hear.
I think it's also anyone under 13, I think, is free entry.
Yeah.
So if you've got any kids that would fancy a day out, I think it's free entry into Tynecastle. It's 4:10 kickoff.
This is a kind of interesting question. I think it's a big ask, obviously, but given I was going to say the head start, but it's more than a head. It's a full body start, I think, for the fact that, when you'll know yourself, the history of the women's game, Rose Riley famously had to go to Italy to get a game and all that kind of thing. Held back massively for decades, so that has got to be made up at some point. But in general, what do you make of that question from Anthony?
Yeah, I think it is difficult. I think in terms of Scotland, I think there are still cultural issues there at times too, in selling the game and promoting the game. I think in a wider context, I definitely think across Europe, you will start to see real significant numbers, which is what you've actually seen already this season. I think we were speaking about it before we came on air, Sean, about Barcelona attracting a world record attendance of more than 91,000 for the Champions League quarter-final against Real Madrid, and then getting a slightly higher attendance for the semi-final against Wolfsburg. I mean, those are extraordinary figures, and I would take the point that they're fudged a bit slightly because Barcelona had massively promoted those games. They were free to season ticket holders. Tickets were very, very cheap for anyone else who wanted to go along and buy them. But you had 91,000 people in a stadium to watch a women's game, and I think that's remarkable. I think it does buck the trend of average attendances. If you look at La Liga, the average attendances wouldn't be anywhere near within those figures. So it would be a question of sustaining that interest and building on it. But I think it's possibly what you'll see is the first thing where you'll see it is the tournaments. World Cups are still there's great fanfare around them. European championships, huge interest in these tournaments. I think particularly when you can play them, you position them at good times, summer holidays. People are sitting having a beer, watching games. They attract very, very significant television audiences and participation figures. Champions League figures too. I think the viewing figures last weekend for that game between Barcelona and Lyon broke all previous records. So I think the first place where you'll notice the growth is these big showcase tournaments that will start to fly the flag and promote the women's game, and then there will be a trickle effect down into day-to-day and week-to-week football. But I think that there is an increase in interest in it.
That's the game you mentioned. That's the one Patrick couldn't kind of quite remember. It was the Barcelona games. Both of them actually won it. The semi-final, the quarter-final and the semi-final were both topping 90,000, I think.
91.5, I think, then 91.8 or something like that off the top of my head.
David Bradley asking that, have they all got their own stadium? No, but I think that's unrealistic to expect right now. Would you agree, Alison?
Yeah, I think that's one of the real difficulties of the women's game is that you're borrowing almost places to play. Celtic played a lot of games in Airdrie, played a few games there. Glasgow City play Peters Hill. Rangers use Murray Park as a kind of home games. They've got a stand, it's kind of small stand, and play home games there. Occasionally there have been games played in the stadium at Celtic Park. I think there was Celtic played Hibs at Celtic Park a couple of months back, but they are few and far between because obviously of the logistics that come around that in terms of trying to fit it in and it doesn't interfere too much or have a negative impact on the pitch. But yeah, I think that is one of the real difficulties of the women's game. I think it is one of the potential headaches about how you solve that and where you can play, because I think it would be helpful to have a permanent base that you know is your own home ground.
It always is. I think just in general, I think it's unrealistic just now to say, like, not that anyone is saying that, but they must have one. I think ideally further down the line, especially with the rise of professionalism and stuff, it's probably one of those things that's on the map. But I think it's unrealistic to expect a lot of the teams to have one just now. For instance, I was saying to you, Alison, before I moved back down the road, I was in Aberdeen. I covered Aberdeen women for a while. They switched their home games between, mostly Cormac Park, Aberdeen's training ground, but then for slightly bigger games like their league winning game or their league clinching game, league celebration game last year, and a couple this year to Balmoral Stadium, which is Cove's Stadium, which has got a big stand and stuff. So I don't really. I mean, David said it's a major problem. It could be if it's still the case in 20 years' time. I don't think it's a major problem just now, Alison. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think probably it lends itself to quite a nomadic existence when you don't have a permanent ground that you know is your stadium and it belongs to the women's team. I think it's difficult to think that you could always share the main stadium just because of the volume of games and obviously at the minute the men's game is where the money is. That's where clubs make their money. So I think it's difficult to justify using those stadiums when you're bringing in 3,000, 4,000, maybe 5,000. I think there's not much sense in opening a 60,000 seater stadium for those numbers. But I do think long-term wise, it's something that you would maybe want to look at.
Now, we spent maybe a wee bit longer than we expected talking about general, but getting back to the game on Sunday, which is obviously why we're kind of previewing it. Celtic have been through tougher ties to even get to the final than Glasgow City. I was kind of surprised at how tough their run was in comparison. I mean, Glasgow City played Hamilton, who are bottom of the top flight. Queen's Park, second bottom of the second tier. Stirling Uni, bottom of the second tier, and then Partick, second bottom of the top tier. Whereas Celtic played Edinburgh City, who are all right, are in neither division. But then Rangers, who won the league. Aberdeen, who are fifth, and as I say, are playing really good football under Emma Hunter. And then Hearts, who are also in the top flight, eighth. So Celtic have definitely had the more difficult run. It would almost top it off just to beat like the great Glasgow City again in a final after that run, because there's virtually no minuses to be taken from beating those teams on that run.
Yeah, they really did have a hard run. And Celtic would have been the only team, I think, to have beaten Rangers this season. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think Celtic beat.
Mm-hmm.
I think Celtic are the only team to have beaten Rangers. I'm trying to think of one of the Glasgow City games.
I was going to say not in the league, but the
in the cup.
In the cup games. Aye. I was going to say, because they went unbeaten in the league, but
yeah, they were unbeaten in the league, but I think Celtic put them out at the semi-final stage in the League Cup. I think so much for Celtic on Sunday will be a question of belief. I think you have to go in. Glasgow City have been the dominant force in Scottish football for so long, and they are a very strong side. They are a side who have a winning mentality. They're a side who are used to winning games, winning competitions. They've competed in Champions League football. They really set the bar for Scottish women's football for a very long time. An impressive club all round. And I think from Celtic's perspective, it will be not being intimidated by the reputation that they bring, by the success that they've carried over the last couple of decades. I think it's about the mental approach, I think, will be huge. I think you have to have the belief in one another and in your system. And also, I think you have to take your chances when they come, like in any big game and against any big team. They will scent any kind of weakness, and I think you have to be clinical when there are opportunities presenting themselves.
Well, one benefit, I realise that there very much is, and I agree with you, a kind of element of don't be intimidated by kind of big bad Glasgow City, that's a final. But apart from that cup final, they've already played them this season. They've played them another 3 times, so it's not like it's an unfamiliar opponent. Of the 4 games this season, all right, the head-to-heads favour City because they've won 2 and drawn 1. But as I keep going back to, the one that Celtic won was the one with the trophy at the end of it. So it almost counts double for me in a way. And you mentioned a couple of the other games. There was, if not excuses, and I don't think they will use it as an excuse for losing and drawing, but certainly caveats to maybe why the games went the way that they did. So
I think they were seriously compromised in terms of the goalkeeping situation. I don't think there's any question about that.
In terms of the game itself, City finished 10 points clear of Celtic in second, lost just 1 league game all season. But in terms of goal threat, they were pretty even. I think it was Glasgow City maybe scored 87 and Celtic scored 84 or something. It was like both teams score goals. So with that in mind, and the likes of Drusilla, Chinchilla, Davidson, Jacinta, Charlie Wellings, all of those on the pitch on Sunday, would you be surprised if it ends up as a final with actually a fair few goals in it?
I think it definitely has the potential for that. I think it can be quite open. I think you'll see 2 teams who really want to win it rather than 2 teams who don't want to lose it. I think 2 teams who are committed to winning it, which I think lends itself to a fairly open encounter. And both of them have really good attacking players. Both of them play an attacking style of football too. It favours them. It's quite an expansive pitch. I think Tynecastle can be it's quite an open pitch. Yeah, I think you could see goals. I definitely think there's a potential for that.
Are you willing to give a score prediction, given that you're going to the game? Or
I'll say Celtic 2-1.
I'll need to go something different then. I've just said goal, so I can't say 1-0. So Celtic 2-0. Then I think Glasgow City will score, but Celtic 3-1 actually. That's what I'll go. Celtic 3-1.
That's a big score. Right?
I don't think we're allowed to take anything other than a Celtic win. Is that not in my contract? But right, I've enjoyed this. I think it's something you should be seeing a lot more of. But I enjoy the game on Sunday, Alison. Keep your eyes on the website because there'll be stuff there on this game, but also on plenty of other stuff. And before we go, another word for our sponsors. One Football, as I said at the start, one-stop shop for all your football needs. Everything on there. News, fixtures, opposition stuff, some stats available on all the kind of platforms that you'd want it on your mobiles and stuff. And again, as I always say, now's the time to take advantage of the 30 days of full free access to the website. So if you go www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe, take advantage of that. You can't say better than free, really. So if you've been on the fence, give us a wee shot. And as I say, keep an eye on the website over the weekend because there is some cracking stuff going up. But for now, thanks for your comments as always, guys, and thanks for your contribution, Alison. And we'll see you all on Monday.
Have a nice weekend.
Cheers.